The rain fell hard that night. Daniel sat alone in his small apartment, staring at the ceiling, wondering if God had forgotten his prayers. For years, he had whispered the same request: "Please, send me a woman who knows her worth, who's brave and confident enough to walk beside me through life." He wasn't asking for perfection, just someone with strength, someone who could match his passion, his drive, his dreams. He wanted a woman who spoke her mind, who laughed loud and lived bold. But the silence of that room mocked him, the emptiness of his heart echoing louder than the thunder outside. He didn't know it yet, but God had already answered his prayer, just not in the way he expected. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the beauty of love's timing, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support keeps stories like this alive. Daniel had built his life around hard work and quiet faith. A self-made man in his 30s, he ran a small design firm in the city. His days were filled with deadlines, his nights with reflections. People admired his confidence, but few knew the loneliness that lived beneath it. Every time he saw couples laughing at coffee shops or families walking hand in hand, a part of him ached. He prayed often, not just for love, but for purpose. Someone he could grow with, someone who'd challenge him and remind him that life was more than work and solitude. One Sunday morning, after a particularly exhausting week, he decided to attend a local church he hadn't visited before. The place was quiet, humble, with old wooden pews and sunlight streaming through stained glass. He sat near the back, lost in thought, when he noticed her. She was sitting alone in the third row, head bowed, hands trembling slightly as she tried to turn the pages of a hymnal. Her movements were delicate, almost fragile, like she was afraid of taking up too much space. There was something about her, something broken but pure. That caught his heart before he could understand why. After the service ended, most people left quickly, but she lingered, staring at the altar as if searching for courage. Daniel hesitated, then walked up and offered a gentle smile. "Beautiful service," he said softly. She looked up, startled, then nodded without saying a word. He noticed the way her eyes darted away, the faint pink in her cheeks. She wanted to respond, but couldn't. It took him a moment to realize she wasn't shy, she was struggling. Over the next few weeks, he saw her again and again, always sitting alone, always quiet. Sometimes she'd hum softly during hymns but never spoke. Eventually, he learned her name from a mutual friend, Emily. She volunteered at a local shelter, helped with the children's choir, and spent most of her free time painting. People said she was kind but rarely talked. Some whispered that she'd been through something terrible years ago, a tragedy that had taken her voice, not physically, but emotionally. Daniel tried to let it go, but something inside him couldn't. He had prayed for a confident woman, yet here was someone who could barely speak. Still, every time he saw her, her gentle eyes, her quiet grace, he felt peace. Maybe God wasn't giving him what he wanted, maybe he was giving him what he needed. Weeks turned into months. Slowly, gently, he found ways to be around her. He'd help carry supplies to the shelter, volunteer at the same events, or sit near her at church picnics. He never pushed conversation, instead, he spoke softly about small things, the weather, a song, the laughter of children nearby. And though she never spoke back, she listened. She always listened, her eyes holding his words like they mattered. Then, one evening, something changed. It was raining again, just like the night he first prayed that prayer. Daniel was at the shelter helping clean up after an event when he found Emily sitting alone by the window, staring outside. The storm reflected in her eyes. "You okay?" he asked. She hesitated, then took a deep breath. For the first time, she spoke. Her voice was quiet, trembling, like someone learning to trust the sound of their own heart. "Sometimes, it feels like the rain never stops," she whispered. Those 7 words hit him harder than any sermon ever could. She didn't have to say more. He saw it, the pain behind her silence, the courage it took to even let those words out. That night, they sat for hours, saying almost nothing. But somehow, it was everything. In the days that followed, her trust grew. She began to talk, slowly, haltingly, but with sincerity. She told him bits and pieces of her past, how she'd once been engaged to a man who made her feel small, who turned her confidence into fear. She had lost her laughter, her voice, her belief that she could ever be enough. When she left that relationship, she promised herself never to speak where she wasn't safe again. Daniel listened. He never tried to fix her, never rushed her healing. He just stayed, steady, patient, kind. Sometimes he'd leave her small notes with encouraging words. Other times, he'd take her to quiet parks where she could paint in peace. He believed in her even when she didn't believe in herself. Slowly, she began to bloom again. Months later, she stood in front of a room full of children at the shelter, reading them a story aloud. Her voice still shook, but she spoke. Daniel watched from the back, tears in his eyes. That moment, watching her reclaim what was once taken from her, felt like witnessing a miracle. He realized something profound: confidence isn't about loudness or charm, it's about courage. And she had more courage than anyone he'd ever met. But their story wasn't without challenges. People around them didn't always understand. Some questioned why a confident, successful man like Daniel would fall for someone so quiet, so withdrawn. Others wondered if Emily would ever be able to live up to his world. Even Daniel struggled sometimes. When her silence felt heavy, when she'd retreat into her shell after long days. But love, real love, isn't about perfection, it's about showing up. There was one night when things nearly broke. Emily received a letter from her ex-fiancé, apologizing, begging for closure. It shook her more than she expected. She disappeared for days, no calls, no messages. Daniel panicked but didn't chase her. Instead, he wrote her a letter of his own, slipped it under her door. It simply said, "You don't owe your past another word. You only owe your future your voice." When she returned, she didn't say much. She didn't have to. She just walked up to him, tears in her eyes, and whispered, "Thank you, for believing in me when I couldn't." That was the night he knew, this was the woman he had prayed for. Not because she was confident in the way he once imagined, but because she was brave enough to rebuild herself from the ground up. They continued to grow together, two souls healing in tandem. Daniel taught her to believe that her voice mattered. Emily taught him that strength sometimes looks like softness, that confidence isn't always loud, it's steady, quiet, unbreakable. Years later, on a bright spring morning, Daniel stood at the same church where they'd first met. Emily walked down the aisle in a simple white dress, sunlight catching her hair. As she reached him, she took his hands, and with a trembling but confident voice, said her vows. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. The woman who once couldn't speak was now declaring her love out loud, for everyone, and for herself. Life after marriage wasn't perfect, but it was real. They faced struggles, financial setbacks, health scares, moments of doubt, but they faced them together. Daniel often thought back to that first prayer. He realized now that God hadn't ignored him, he had simply rewritten the definition of confident. Emily's confidence wasn't loud or showy. It was the quiet kind. The kind that survives storms, that learns to speak even when the world once told it to stay silent. And whenever the rain came again, Daniel would look at her, her calm smile, her steady hands, and remember that night years ago when he first found her sitting alone, trembling under church light. She wasn't who he prayed for. She was better. Because she taught him that love doesn't always arrive in the form you expect, it arrives in the form you need to grow. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps bring more stories of hope, love, and healing to life. Before we end, tell me in the comments, do you believe that sometimes the person meant for you isn't the one you asked for, but the one who teaches you what real love is? Emily and Daniel's story reminds us all, sometimes God answers our prayers not with perfection, but with purpose. Because the most beautiful relationships aren't between perfect people, they're between imperfect souls who choose to heal together. And when love helps someone find their voice again, that's not just romance, that's redemption.